this? All right, very good, everyone. Well, thanks for being here. And as the screen says, hopefully, as you guys are able to see, we are studying the book of Ruth. And yes, we are today on Ruth chapter 4 out of a 4-chapter book. So we're finishing up tonight. And the lesson is called Happily Ever After. And I don't necessarily know if that's the best word, because it makes it sound like a fairy tale. That Ruth is most certainly true. It's a true story, and it's rooted in history. But what is beautiful about it is that in some stories, you've got the good parts, and then the difficult parts come at the end. And they're really, this whole story has been difficult up to this point, and now we are about to get to the happily ever after part of it, so to speak. It's been 3 chapters of difficult days and tough times and problems to overcome. But tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the ways that God's been at work. As you have seen in our title slide, we were talking about God's redeeming love, but we're also talking about God's unfolding plan. And in this plan, we do see that there are times where we do come through some difficult days, but that God has a plan that is unfolding, that brings us into his light and his love. So we're going to review, talk about y'all's favorite passages from this chapter. We're going to talk about the guardian redeemer at the gate, talk about big choices, small choices, and big pictures. And then we'll talk about our big takeaways, not just from chapter 4, but also from the entire book. So hopefully you guys are ready to roll. Let's start off with our review. In chapter 1, verse 1, it says, "In the days when the judges ruled, a man from Bethlehem in Judah went to live for a while in the country of Moab." So we know that the time and the setting of the book of Ruth is in the days when the judges ruled. And you guys know that there is a book entitled Judges in the Bible, but you may or may not know that Ruth originally was a part of the book of Judges. And I did not know that until I began to study a little deeper in this particular Bible study. But I can see why the Lord led those to kind of pull this as its own book, because it has a very different tone and a very different vibe to it from the other passages in the book of Judges. So let's talk about in the time of the judges. The time of the judges was a time, before Moses gave the law, so it was a really lawless time. B, a time that had heroes like Samson, Gideon, and Samuel, who was the last judge. Or C, a time that lasted about 550 years. Or D, a time that ended with Samson, the final judge, and a prophet. Or E, none of the above. And if you're wondering, did I switch it up a little bit? I did. I want to make sure and keep you on your toes. I'm going to adjust my camera just a little bit so you guys are looking at a little bit easier view to see. Does anybody know what it is? What is the correct answer?
Most of the above.
I think somebody got the right one. What did somebody say? B?
I did.
Okay, that is correct. It had heroes like Samson, Gideon, and Samuel, who was the last judge. Samson was not. Didn't realize I was doing such a mind scramble because they both had the same last name, or pardon me, same start to their name. So it is actually B. Samson, Gideon, and Samuel, who was the last judge. We know that actually the time of the judges was only about 325 years, not before Moses gave the law, but well after, and after Joshua had led those into the promised land. So we know a little bit of those were kind of some, just making sure that you're on your toes. But then here it says, the place was they went to live for a while in the country of Moab. So we know the time and the place of the book of Ruth. And this is the country of Moab in the time of the judges. You can see the Dead Sea here, and you may know about the Sea of Galilee and all of these others, the Jordan River that flows down into the Dead Sea. And there is Moab on that side of it. Modern day Israel here with the Dead Sea, the Sea of Galilee, and the modern day nation of Jordan. And so we see there, that's where all of this was taking place. And then leaving the country of Moab to go back to the town of Bethlehem, which was the city of David. And unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord. All the same geography that's going on there. And so you can kind of understand and know what's happening and how it connects to the Christmas story. All right, very quickly, review of the lesson continues. When Ruth said, "Spread the corner of your garment over me, for you are a guardian redeemer," she was A, asking for Boaz to marry her and make her his wife. B, asking Boaz to get one of the younger men to marry her. C, to make Naomi his wife because she wasn't interested in Boaz. Or D, a woman who was just really, really cold that particular night. What is the correct answer? Yes, I see.
A.
That is correct. It is letter A. She was asking for Boaz to marry her and make her his wife. This is not something that we see because we don't know some of the story and some of the behind the scenes there. But as we understand and go a little deeper, we see Boaz understood clearly she was asking for him to be her guardian redeemer and marry her. So let's see here. When we look at the customs of the day, the timeline of Ruth chapter 1, we can say that Ruth likely was A, approximately 15 to 20 years old. She'd already seen a lot for a woman that age. Or was it B, approximately 25 to 30 years old? She could still have children. Or C, approximately 35 to 45, that biological clock is ticking. Or D, approximately 47 to 55, already past childbearing age. Do you guys remember we mentioned this in passing?
A.
B.
Thought it was A.
Oh, I got a bunch of you guys giving me different answers. This was one of my best confusion questions that I could throw at you. Now, if you remember, we talked about how, and I can see why there might be some confusion. Ruth was probably married somewhere between the ages of 15 and 20, but she lived with her husband for about 10 years before she went back to live in the city of Bethlehem. So the correct answer is actually 25 to 30 years old. She could still have children, and that was important in the story. And I ask these questions to make sure that these things kind of get solidified in your head, because it is important as you kind of go back and read. All right, so now it's your turn. What are some of your favorite passages of scripture from chapter 4? I'm open. I'm ready for you guys to share with me, and I've got such faith in you guys bringing something good to the table that I didn't bring a favorite passage of this chapter because I knew you guys already had it covered. I had plenty of time to put it together, but I figured y'all would do it. So
Can I say 15?
what is it?
Can I say verse 15?
Can you say verse 15? Go ahead and read it for us.
And he shall be unto thee a restorer of thy life and a nourisher of thine old age. For thy daughter-in-law, which loveth thee, which is better to thee, I can't see very good, than 7 sons hath borne him. And it gave me chills. Because she was a daughter-in-law who her mother-in-law loved her,
Yeah,
and she loved her mother-in-law.
yeah. It was interesting that they said that Ruth would be better to her than 7 sons would have been. I don't know what that says about us as men, Leroy, Frank, myself, but probably right. Probably right. You ladies, y'all have a way. That is good stuff. And I love that. He will be a restorer to you. I think that is a beautiful thing. A great passage. Good stuff. Thank you, Miss Isabel. What else? You guys have any others? Another passage that really jumps out to you and that you love?
I think 14, right before 15, says, blessed be the Lord, which has not left thee this day without a kingsman. And she's given the Lord her praise and her thanksgiving.
Who was it that said that?
Naomi.
Naomi. And what was Naomi telling people to call her when she came back from Moab?
Mara.
Mara. That's right. And what did Mara mean and what did Naomi mean? You guys remember? You guys are doing really good on this pop quiz, by the way.
Bitter.
Mara meant bitter. Do you remember what Naomi meant?
Yeah.
A little tougher. It meant pleasant. So she went away pleasant and she came back bitter. But here, Frank, I want to ask you to read that passage again. And I'm touched by this passage because this is why we go into all the context, you guys, to remember that it gets deeper. The more that you know, the more layer upon layer upon layer, you learn more and it grows in its significance. So I want to remember she went away pleasant. She came back bitter. But right at the very end of this passage of scripture in chapter 4 of a 4-chapter book, what does she say, Frank?
Said, and the woman, that's Ruth, said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord, which has not left thee this day without a kinsman, that his name may be famous in Israel.
Yeah. And I just think it's a beautiful thing when we look at what God is doing. And when we realize what God is up to, even when it's difficult for us to realize it in the moments, and it's easy to become bitter when we don't see God moving on a timetable that pleases us. But this is why I love the song Waymaker so much. I think it is so profound. It says, even when I don't see it, you're working. And even when I don't feel it, you're working because you never stop working. And I love that passage of scripture, Frank, and it reminds me of that Waymaker song. And it reminds me that our bitterness and our hurt is not forever if we are willing to let it go. And that's a beautiful thing. We've all been through things that make us hurt and bitter and turn us from pleasant people to bitter people, but it is a beautiful thing. Great stuff, Frank, Isabel, good passages for sure. Anyone else, somebody else want to jump in and share your favorite passage from chapter 4? Anyone?
About verse 17.
Please, please.
Let's see. 11 through 15, 16, 17 kind of ties together, but
yeah,
this put 17. It says, also the neighbors' women gave him a name, saying, there is a son born to Naomi, and they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. This was kind of awkward because the mother and the father normally named a child. And here, these women are being prophetic. Well, just what Frank read earlier about, I guess it was the verse before that when they're speaking about Rebecca and Leah.
Yeah.
However, these women named the child Obed. And the father and mother it's like, wait a minute. So they were anticipating that child would take care of that old age woman. Well, I shouldn't put it that way, but that this child would come and take care of Naomi.
Yeah.
And you saw the parts that she was the one that was feeding him and taking care of him.
Yeah.
But so now the empty one is now full, and the bitter one is now blessed.
Wow. Good stuff, man. Good stuff. I love it, Leroy. Thank you so much. That is good. And it's a good observation to notice that all of the women there in the town were calling him Obed, which I don't know exactly what Obed means, but I have a feeling it meant something significant about what he would be. And that is a beautiful thing. Yeah, good stuff. Great observations. I got time for one more. Do you guys have one more favorite passage in this? And I just remind you guys, it's always so much better when you guys have your part and you're sharing. So
Number
feel
6.
free to jump in. What's that?
6.
Okay, yes, jump in and share chapter 4, verse 6 for us.
Okay, and the kingsman said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I may mine own inheritance. Redeem thou my right to thyself, for I cannot redeem it.
Hmm.
So I was thinking there that
Oh, I think you froze
it's
up
like
there.
Boaz brought out the whole community.
Miss Donna, I think
See
you froze up there.
if the guy he wanted her.
Did Donna freeze up for all of you guys too?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Donna, if you don't
I think
mind,
so too. Sorry.
no, it's okay. We're just catching each other, glitching back and forth. Do you mind just starting over? You read the passage, we heard that part, but then you started to share what it meant to you. Would you mind restarting and just sharing that part? Because I want to hear what it means to you. And it all just kind of paused altogether.
I was saying that
Lost her again.
yeah, my computer's glitching. I was weakness, and he wanted to make sure that
Yeah.
Okay, well,
that the right person, that he was be the right person for Ruth. So he wanted witness. He wanted to make sure that he asked the one of the kingsmen if he wants her, I guess in a way like my land proof. So he want everyone to know that in front of everyone that he's gonna
it is
pick her.
interesting. It is interesting that
So he
he
took his
goes
shoes
way out
off.
of his way there to make sure that he says, I'll buy the land. And then the guy comes back and says,
in front of
well,
everyone to
Mhm.
make sure that he didn't know
I think I'm going to have to mute Miss Donna here.
that
And I'm
he's the
so
one that he's
sorry to
gonna
do
marry.
that because I think we're every time she thinks we're open, we're talking and back and forth. So, but I think what Miss Donna was saying, if I'm not mistaken, is that she was saying that she loved the way that he was saying, I'm going to give this guy an opportunity, but if he's not, then I will. And wanted to make sure that he was the right man at the right time. I caught enough to know that that was something that she was speaking about. And I think that is a beautiful thing. He wasn't elbowing in, but he was definitely pursuing with heart and passion that he was going to make sure that he was in there. And I've honestly, I'm with you guys. I would have rather hear her say it than me, but I guess the computer gods and the Zoom gods were against us at this point. All right. So let's real quickly move on to the guardian redeemer at the gate. And thank you guys. Hopefully one or two of y'all are ready to share a big idea at the end. So let's talk about where we left off and where we pick up today. We're picking up at the beginning of chapter 4, the guardian redeemer at the gate. And if you remember, we were at the threshing floor. I kind of termed it jokingly Operation Threshing Floor, where Naomi sends Ruth and she says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go in and I want you to be in the threshing floor, wait until he's had his meal, when he's comfortable. And then when he has that time, he's going to be able to, hear what you have to say and be in the right mood to receive it. And so that's exactly what happens. And if you remember, Ruth was at the threshing floor, and here Boaz, they have this conversation, and she says, spread your cloak over me, for you are my kinsman or guardian redeemer. And he says, Now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all that you're asking. All of the people of my town know that you're a woman of noble character. Although it is true that I am a guardian redeemer of our family, there is another who is more closely related than I. Stay here the night, and in the morning, if he wants to do his duty as your guardian redeemer, good. Let him redeem you. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here until morning. So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before anyone could be recognized. And he said, no one must know that a woman came to the threshing floor. And so if you remember, we talked about how this was a very, very bold move, a very fine line that she was walking, but she literally went in there and basically in that terminology of that day said, I want you to marry me. And I want you to be the guardian redeemer that purchases me and Naomi and all of the things that come along with it. And then she went home and told Naomi, and Naomi said, wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens today, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today. But we talked about last week that there were at least 4 things that we needed to know that Boaz had to overcome or come to grips with before he made this declaration and made good on this declaration. And I want to remind you what those were. Naomi was likely to have to sell her family's land to survive. So Naomi's life was at stake, more than likely, at least the life that she needed and wanted to live. But Ruth and Naomi were coming as a package deal. They were twice the financial responsibility. Ruth could work, but Naomi probably didn't have many years left. But Ruth could bear children, which is another thing that men wanted in a wife. But let's be clear, as best they knew, because it was always the woman's fault back in the day, whenever they couldn't have children. It wasn't right, but that's what they always thought, that a woman was barren. And so he was marrying a barren woman. Now, we know that God intervenes and that there was a truth that they did not understand. Boaz had everything he needed. He was going out of his way to be a blessing, but he was also fulfilling the duty. And I'm going to be honest with you, I think he loved Ruth. I just think he loved her. I think he saw in her the woman that she was. Every time he talks to her, he says to her, I know what kind of woman you are. Everybody knows what kind of woman you are. I think that you're a kind-hearted woman for what you've done for your mother-in-law. And I'm impressed by the way that you're here and not at home. You left your family so that you could follow God and follow your mother-in-law. I think he was in love with her. He noticed her whenever he first wrote up in chapter 2. I was re-listening to the entire book again, just to kind of get the whole flow. And the very first thing he says is like, who's that over there? When he rides up, he's like, hey, Lord bless you guys. And they're all like, hey, Lord bless you, boss. And he's like, hey, who's that over there? I think he took notice of Ruth. I think there was chemistry. I'm reading between the lines, but I think he noticed Ruth, thought she was beautiful. And then when he found out she had inner beauty that even exceeded her outer beauty, I think he was over the moon. And I think he was excited, but didn't want to get too excited because there was somebody in front of him. And I think there were some other things to overcome. We're 2 into 4 so far. Here's the third one. Ruth is a Moabitess, not an Israelite. Marrying her is a choice that could bring shame on Boaz's Israelite family. The Israelites were hardcore about keeping the line pure. We are God's people. Everybody else is not us kind of thought. And so they were selfishly protective of that line. But then fourthly, Ruth was considered barren. We already talked a little bit about that. Ruth was obtaining a widow, her mother-in-law, and all of those stigmas were likely to remain. So there were some things to overcome. But the whole thing that was said at the end of chapter 3 by Naomi was, that man's not going to let it rest, not even a day. He's going to tackle that immediately. I just feel it. Just watch and see. And so then we begin in chapter 4 and going to go 1 through 12. And I'm going to have Miss Teresa read for us, and then we'll come back. Okay. All right, Teresa, you ready to roll?
Okay, yep.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat down there just as the guardian redeemer, or kinsman redeemer, he had mentioned came along. Boaz said, "Come over here, my friend, and sit down." So he went over and sat down. Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, "Sit here," and they did so. Then he said to the guardian redeemer, "Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me so I will know, for no one has the right to do it except you, and I'm next in line." "I will redeem it," he said. Then Boaz said, "On the day you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property." At this, the guardian redeemer said, "Then I cannot redeem it because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I cannot do it." Now, in earlier times in Israel, for the redemption and transfer of property to become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legalizing transactions in Israel. So the guardian redeemer said to Boaz, "Buy it yourself," and he removed his sandal. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, "Today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. Today you are witnesses." Then the elders and all the people at the gate said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the family of Israel. May you have standing in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman, may your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah."
All right. In this passage that we just read, is there anything that jumps out to you guys? Anyone?
It's the genealogy. Tamar is in the genealogy of Jesus.
That's right. That's a great observation. And we talked a little bit about that 2 different times in our study of this 4-week study. So Tamar and Judah pop up once more in the genealogy that we're talking about here. Good stuff. Great observation. Is there anything else that jumps out to you guys?
Boaz, when thinking of Boaz, one thing that came into my mind for him to be a very gentleman, very kind, and all. I feel that he have watched a live example of his father, Salmon, because Salmon is the one who married Rahab, the prostitute, who was saved by God because she was a person who saved those 2 spies when Joshua sent those 2 spies over there. So Boaz, being son of Rahab and Salmon, I don't think it just happened that he just grew up to be such a gentleman. He just saw what his father has done to his mother, and their married life has made him to be a great example.
Wow. Yeah, that is fantastic. Kirthi, I'm embarrassed to say that I did not realize that, but it fits, doesn't it? That Salmon married Rahab, who was not an Israelite, but chose to be an Israelite by going the way of God, Jehovah, over her own gods, right? and what happens in Ruth's situation. She also leaves the Moabite way and follows her mother because of following God Jehovah. That's beautiful. I mean, that's fantastic. And I had not really thought of that or put that together. That is really good. And I would just like to provide you with my sandal as a pastoral teacher. I just want to give this to you, Kirthi. Great job. That's my way.
Thank you.
Also, I'd like to give you also, Teresa, guess my other sandal for doing a better job of teaching name or pronouncing names than I do. And I went to Bible college, so there's a thing there that makes me really angry with you, but I'll give you my sandal anyway. All right, sorry, just seeing if y'all were paying attention. What a weird thing, right? Like, oh, here's my sandal. But I want to tell you, I got a text from Miss Becky. Now, Miss Becky is on and she is listening, but she refuses to she's got a computer that refuses to allow her to speak in. So she texted me, and I'm going to read you exactly what she wrote. She said, just a quick comment. I used to work at a title company in the 1970s. Up until the 1930s or 40s, land was sold in this country by the seller picking up a clump of dirt from the land being sold and giving it to the purchaser. This was how land was conveyed. It was called livery of seizure. Just a bit of history from you, or for you, Becky. And isn't that cool? I mean, isn't it strange the way that things used to be done? And it feels like no one would ever do anything like that in our modern day. And it's like, hold on. My dad was born in the 40s. So it's not that long ago that we did something kind of similar. And I guess back in those days, you probably had a way of a sandal representing you, whether it's your style that you made or certain materials that you made it out of, or maybe initials or something carved into them on the feet so they didn't get stolen. I have no idea. But there was a way of transferring deeds and properties and making decisions like that through that. I thought that was pretty interesting. So thanks, Miss Becky. I give you a big thumbs up on that. It was very interesting. But yes, lots of interesting things going on here. Anything else jump out to you guys real quickly before we go any further about that passage? Yeah.
Well, I won't make you do it, but I so enjoy reading genealogy at the end.
We're going to get there.
That's
And by the
me.
way, I told Teresa that I wouldn't do that to her, but I should have done that to her. I should have made her do it because, like I said, you do something really well, you got to do it all the time. So there it is.
It's beautiful.
It is beautiful, and every one of those names are important people who just become names, but they all had stories, which is important for sure. Here's what jumped out to me. It's not the right thing that jumped out, but this jumped out to me. Boaz says, if you'll redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me so I will know. No one has the right to do it except you. And then I'm next in line. I'll redeem it, he says. And then Boaz says, okay, cool, buddy. But also, by the way, on the day that you buy that land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth, the Moabite, dead man's widow. And then he's like, if she comes in the package deal, I cannot redeem it because that would endanger my own estate. You redeem it. I won't do it. I can't do it. I don't know if this guy was just afraid of what his wife at home was going to say about the new wife he was bringing home. I don't know. But he seems to be interested in the land, but not the woman that comes along with the land, which I thought was really interesting. And I also find it interesting how clear Boaz's intentions were and how clearly different they were. This guy's like, yeah, I'd love to buy that land. Hey, by the way, a woman comes along. No, I can't do it. And then he buys it. He's like, every one of you guys is witnesses that I bought the land. And by the way, don't forget that the thing that comes along with the land is Ruth, the Moabitess. She's going to be my wife. It's just like a very dramatic difference. And isn't it just like God to allow something so in line with love to happen in this case? This is not just a man who will save her because he's a good man. It's a man who will love her and protect her mother-in-law and enjoy every moment of it because he loves that woman. And I think it's cool, not that he provided a kinsman redeemer, but that he provided the right kinsman redeemer for her. And I just think that's powerful. I don't know. It just really spoke to me. Good stuff to me. Hopefully it speaks to you. All right. Questions, thoughts, or comments? You guys have any before we kind of go on to our next section? Anyone?
Yes, I do. You know, in that 5th verse, it speaks of Ruth being a Moabitess, right?
Yes.
But back in Deuteronomy, like the 23rd chapter, it speaks of an Amorite or a Moabite shall not enter to the congregation of the Lord. And it goes on to speak of, you know, why. And I just wonder why that didn't come into play more here.
Yeah.
Well, God's on charge. That's probably why, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is important and probably not mentioned nearly enough. And I think that what the Israelites, even to this day, have missed is God was not trying to exclude somebody because of race or nationality as much as religious practice and devotion to God Jehovah versus all the craziness that was going on in the other religions. And so I think it was much more along those lines to keep the religious concept pure more so than the national concept.
Right.
And then the Jews grabbed a hold of that and took pride in their nationality, not in their righteousness. God wanted it to be a holy and pure righteousness, not just a holy and pure bloodline. They glommed onto the wrong thing, like we often do as mankind, right? Like, does that make sense, Leroy? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, you nailed it. I was just kind of throwing it out there, but you kind of summed it up, cleaned it up for me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I hope I genuinely believe, like, I mean, it goes on and on and on all throughout the scriptures that God wanted Israel to be a chosen people that reached the world and was an example and a magnet to him because of their holiness. Instead, they took pride in being Jewish. And he was like, that's not what I was shooting for. What I was shooting for was for people to see in this little bitty nation that had no worth on its own. The only thing that they had worth in was the God that served them and chose them, or that was the one that they served and who chose them. But they didn't do that. And anyway, so yeah. Great observation. Great observation. And I think also you go a little deeper. That's why he included these other women in the bloodline that were Moabitesses, that were Canaanites. They were included in his own bloodline that he chose for his own son. He didn't choose a pure, quote unquote, bloodline. He chose the one that he chose for reasons. It's important.
Good deal.
Yeah. Appreciate it, Leroy. Good observations. You guys are amazing. Seriously, I love studying the Bible with you guys. All right, let's keep moving here just so we have some time. Big and small choices and big pictures. And I just want to talk about that for just a moment. Let's talk about that by reading in Ruth chapter 4, beginning in verse 13, going through 17. And I'll pass it back to the woman who has my other sandal, Teresa Guest. Go ahead.
Okay. Naomi gains a son. So Boaz took Ruth and she became his wife. When he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The women said to Naomi, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel." He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age, for your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth." Then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. The women living there said, "Naomi has a son," and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David.
All right, so let me just talk with you a little bit about this. In the book of Ruth, we see Ruth make choice after choice. Some are small and some are great. But looking deeper, we see that the good decisions build on one another and build and develop a new life for a woman who needed it. A big decision, she becomes a follower of Jehovah God. A big decision, she will not leave Naomi, she leaves her family. A bunch of small decisions, she continues to act as a woman of character. It wasn't a one-time thing. She continued to act as a woman of character over and over and over and over again. Again, another small decision that she keeps making. She works hard to provide for herself and for Naomi. You guys see, of all these decisions that we've been talking about so far, here's some more. A small decision. She decides to listen to Naomi, and she's going to submit to her idea of making a move towards pushing for one of the kinsman redeemers to work on their behalf and do the right thing for them. A small decision. She makes a decision in her heart. She's not going to chase after the younger men. She's going to just let the kinsman redeemer be the one that she's going to pursue. A big decision. She goes off script and says, "Spread your garment over me." She's basically asking for Boaz to marry her. And then another big decision, she's asking Boaz to accept her as a woman who might be barren. She thought it was her as well, I'm sure. But it's not just for herself, but it's also for Naomi. Otherwise, she's going to have to sell her land, her family's land. She's made all of these big and small decisions, and it's all playing into a very big picture. And if you guys remember, "The Lord bless you, my daughter," Boaz replies, "this kindness." You remember the kindness was something different than kindness. It was something else. It was kindness in Ruth, not just being nice, but being loyal, even to the point of being sacrificially loyal. And then if you remember here, Boaz says, "Now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all that you're asking." We know that she was asking him to be her kinsman redeemer. "Spread your garment over me because you are one of my kinsman redeemers." Now, this is important. I'm asking this question. Was Ruth infertile? At that time, everybody thought that she was. They thought she was barren because they had lived there together about 10 years. And in about 10 years worth of, marital fidelity and the physical relationship that comes in a marriage, she had yet to conceive. But then in verse 13, Boaz took Ruth and she became his wife. And when he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. And I talked last week a little bit about infertility in both men and women, and how in that time it was always considered a woman's problem and a woman's curse. It's not true. We clearly know that that was not true, but that was the prevailing opinion, that anytime a woman couldn't have children in that time, it was her fault, not ever a man's fault. And so Boaz marries her thinking she will not bear him a son, which is a great source of pride in that society and important as well. Truth be told, now we know that infertility is really a split down the middle kind of thing, where men have a percentage, women have a percentage, and then there's a combination of the two's chemistry together that sometimes doesn't work. And so we know that it was probably not that Ruth was infertile as much as they had a problem in their combination of chemistry, or Mahlon, the man who passed, was infertile. So give this passage a second look real quick with me, y'all. So Boaz took Ruth and she became his wife. And when he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. This is not a right or wrong answer. I'm just wondering your opinion. Does this mean that she was barren and God enabled her to conceive in a miraculous way? Or does this mean that Mahlon was probably the one who was infertile, not Ruth? I mean, is this a miraculous birth or is it not? Or do we really know? What is your opinion? I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
I think it was a miraculous birth.
You do? Tell me why.
Well,
I'm
because
interested, please.
Obed was, in the genealogy of Jesus.
Yes.
And I just looked up the meaning of his name, and it means servant of God, worshiper.
Worship.
So
Nice.
I think it was more of a miraculous birth and God chose Ruth to bear a son that would be in the genealogy of Jesus.
I don't.
What's that, Miss Isabel?
And I don't think it was a miraculous thing. I think it just wasn't going to happen for 10 years.
Okay.
Like you said, it could be the man, and then the right combination and it happened. But
Okay.
it doesn't tell us it was miraculous.
No, it just says that the Lord enabled her to conceive. I think there's room for both sides. I just was curious, and I don't want to start any civil wars, but I'm curious what y'all think. Anybody else have an opinion?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's both sides. I mean, you can see
This
it.
is a
Yeah, you can see it. You know.
Kirti, did you have something to say as well?
Yeah, it is written for your daughter-in-law who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons has given him birth. I feel like the women there must be thinking that though you have 7 sons, maybe the problem is with them, but your daughter-in-law is able or something like that, that she could give him birth.
You know what might be interesting? It might be interesting to wonder what the women thought back then in the day, because women, they knew that they had stigmas that they had to carry sometimes because men ran society, but they were also probably not idiots. They're like, hey, listen, he can't have he can't have children. His brother can't have children. I'll let y'all do the math. Probably not me. I mean, maybe the women talked. Women, I don't want y'all to be talking about us men like that behind our back. We're very sensitive folk, so there you go.
Different story, but look when Sarah had a baby at 98.
Let it be said that nothing is impossible with God. That, when the miraculous birth of Christ happened, it was because God enabled it to happen. And same with Elizabeth, with John the Baptist. But interestingly, Elizabeth and John the Baptist, and this situation with Obed and Ruth, it's an interesting dynamic here that the whole community is paying attention because of a difficult situation that women remained unfazed by the hurt that they were living in. Do you guys follow what I'm saying? Here with Ruth, she was living in hurt, I have no doubt, but yet she remained God's woman in the midst of it. And then when she finally was allowed to conceive, whether that's through natural or supernatural causes, I don't know. There's room in there for both interpretations. I believe that. But when she did conceive, people were paying attention on a whole new level, so much so that the whole town was invested enough for the ladies to say, we're going to name him this. We're going to call him this. And kind of like was mentioned earlier, that they took over the parents' responsibility because this child was our child, not your child, not that child. He was our child. And that's a beautiful thing. I just think it's really cool. Good stuff. So anyway. All right. So let me read the final genealogy because I don't want Teresa taking more than my sandal. This then is the family line of Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron, and Hezron was the father of Ram. Ram, the father of Aminadab, and Aminadab, the father of Nahshon. Nahshon, the father of Salmon. Salmon, the father of Boaz. Boaz, the father of Obed. Obed, the father of Jesse, and Jesse, the father of David. This is where the happily ever after is. This is where the happily ever after ceases because somebody steps forward and shows the love of God in an incredible way to someone who needed it to be shown in an incredible way. And that is what we're talking about. We've been talking about God's redeeming love, God's unfolding plan, and it all comes to a climax right here. God's redeeming love shown in the love of Boaz for Ruth, and God's unfolding plan that it wasn't just a love story, it was a love story that would impact the greatest story ever told, right? And so there is amazing roots right here in this book. It is a beautiful book and it is powerful from start to finish. So here's your homework. Commit to come back and be with us again. Come back. We're going to be probably taking a week or two off, but then we'll be back and we'll be studying probably something in the Gospels as we kind of go towards more of the Easter season to celebrate kind of towards the end of February, beginning of March, and we'll probably be celebrating and starting back on Ash Wednesday. That's right after Fat Tuesday, right? So eat a lot on Fat Tuesday, come back on Ash Wednesday, and we'll be starting. I think that's our final week in February. So I believe that's maybe the 26th. Don't hold me to it. But somewhere in that neighborhood, we'll be starting back with a teaching series that will probably go right up into about the Easter season, and it will be about Jesus and his life and that kind of thing. And so it will be great, and you guys being here will make it great. So I hope you'll plan now that this is just going to be a part of your spiritual growth, that you'll go deeper and grow roots as we go deeper in the scriptures. All right, everybody, raise your right hand. I'm not going to make you promise to be a part of next Bible study, but you're going to make a deal with me real quick. All right, you guys. All right. What you're going to do is you're going to give me your first thought. You're not going to change it. All right. Everybody say, yes, I agree. This is what I'm going to do. Yes. Okay. All right. Here we go. In the book of Ruth, who is the real hero or the real heroine? Now, tell me who first came to your mind. Okay. All right. Who is the real hero? Who's the real heroine?
Boaz.
Ruth,
So you say Boaz, Frank. Who said Ruth?
me,
Oh yeah, all of you all are like me. All right. I've got one vote for Boaz. I got
Ruth.
one vote for Ruth.
Two for Ruth.
Ruth,
Ruth.
Somebody
Ruth.
just said Naomi.
Barbara did over here.
Why Naomi?
Because she orchestrated the whole
And
thing.
she orchestrated the whole thing, she said.
That's an interesting dynamic, isn't it? And then God as the ultimate hero, we know that's the good answer. That's the best answer, I guess.
Yeah.
I think for me, the first one that comes to my mind is Boaz. That he's the hero, but he's not. He's not. He's the first one that comes to my mind. But the reason I asked you guys to decide who's the first one was to think about, now, wait, do I have that right? This is the first one, but is that the right answer? Because every one of those answers that's on your screen right now is some element of truth, right? A lot of heroes in this story. I don't know. Thoughts? Do you guys have thoughts?
I think
Oh.
it took, I think, well, Ruth and Boaz, of course, Naomi and of course God. But it took both of them. Neither Boaz or Ruth would have been the hero probably without the whole story.
Naomi is the root of the whole story.
That's true.
He's the root of the belief in following God.
Yeah. Well, there's not necessarily a right answer. It's just interesting that there are this many options, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I don't want us to ever get to the place where we say, well, I have the right answer or the only answer.
Yeah.
Because the truth is that there are so many layers to scripture. And that, you know, I had a grandfather who was in his 90s and had read the scriptures front to back numerous times. And he told me in his 90s, not long before he passed, he said, I'm just learning so much of the scriptures. And I'm like, man, Papa, it blows my mind. You know more scripture than I've ever even dreamed of knowing. And you're telling me that by rereading it, once again, you're learning something new. And it is powerful because God's word is alive and active according to his own word describing itself. And that's important. That's important. Okay. So real quickly, what is your big takeaway? I've got time for one or two big takeaways. What is the thing that stuck with you? Keep it tight, keep it elevator speech. But I said that you could do a 10,000 foot view, you know, or you could do a 30,000 foot view. You could do the chapter 4 big takeaway, or you could do a from the book of Ruth big takeaway. So I leave it up to you. Somebody tell me what your big takeaway from this chapter or from the book is. And we'll give you guys a couple of moments to share, and then I'll share a couple of mine as we close. Anyone?
Well,
Yeah,
Terry, did you start to say one, Terry?
No, I didn't.
Sometimes the screen jumps around and I thought it jumped to you. So does somebody have a big takeaway that they would be willing to share?
you know, Ruth was reminds me of that Proverbs 31 woman.
Yeah.
You know? And you know, Boaz was a type of man of integrity. And she knew that he would fulfill that promise with a sense of urgency.
Yeah.
But the big thing is they needed to wait on God, and it played out well.
I think that's a great observation. For sure, Ruth is a woman of character and extreme inner beauty that was shining forth, and it was really impacting everybody who paid attention. And even if you weren't paying attention, you couldn't hardly keep from seeing it. And Boaz, again, like you said, waiting on God's goodness, but not wasting time to do God's will either. Some powerful lessons in that alone. Good stuff, Leroy, as always. Another 10,000, 30,000 foot view, 4th chapter,
Yes.
whole book. What do you want? Anybody? Your big
Just
takeaway?
Just the whole book. The whole book showed the strength of a belief, how strong a belief can be, not wavering, because they didn't waver. None of them wavered in their beliefs. And it was an example for us.
That's a good one, Miss Isabel. That really is a good observation, that the strength of belief that never wavered kind of brought them on this path and kept them on this path even when it was hard. And that's the whole book. That's a big takeaway from the whole book. That's for sure a good one. All right, I got time for one more. Anyone?
This may seem a little bit funny or something. After reading the whole book and everything, I thought it would be a nice idea for mothers to pray for a son-in-law like Boaz for their daughters.
That is a good idea for mothers to pray for a son-in-law like Boaz for their daughters. Yeah, that's good. I've got 2 left, and I got one that's pretty good example of Boaz. So I can't complain, but I need to be praying for those other 2. Shelly's online. Shelly, take note. That's right. That's what we're praying for. Great observation. Great observation. Okay, so real quickly, before I go to my big takeaways, did everybody learn at least 2 or 3 things that you didn't know in this lesson? Not this lesson, but this group of lessons. I tell you, I came away just knowing more and grasping more and understanding more, and it just really has been rich. So I do want to say I appreciate you guys. Thanks for your time, and I know that this is time well spent because we're around God's word and we're learning from one another. So thank you for taking the time to do the homework. Thank you for taking the little bit of a risk to get out there and share. I know it's not always easy to talk in front of others, but thank you for doing that. It's important. And the lesson is 10 times better when it's not just me talking and you guys listening. It's you guys talking and us interacting around God's word. So thank you for making it meaningful for me and enjoyable for me personally. And I know for each one of you guys. All right. I'm going to give you a 10,000 foot takeaway, meaning kind of the forest level. I mean, the tree level, and then we'll talk about the forest level, the overarching. Here's the 10,000 foot view takeaway. Sometimes the only difference between a blessing and a curse is God's timing and your faithfulness. Sometimes the only difference between a success and a failure is God's timing and your faithfulness. So don't give up. I think of someone like Ruth and Boaz, who flipped the entire thing on its head. And she went from a cursed woman who was barren to a woman who is in the line of the Messiah and King David. The only thing that changed was somebody said, I'm here to be a blessing and I'm not going to listen to a curse. I'm here to see a success, not give up in the midst of a failure. And the truth is that God's timing is usually in the process of flipping failures to successes and curses into blessings, but we give up in the midst of them. And so God is being faithful, but when we will not be faithful back, when we will not allow God's timing to run its full course, we will not be faithful. We see more curses in our life that exist and more difficulties and failures than God ever intended, mainly because we gave up before God had time to rewrite the script and make it powerfully different. And so don't give up. That's the 10,000 foot view. That's the 4th chapter view. I think the 30,000 foot view, the overview of all of Ruth, I see that it's real life people making real life choices that show God's redeeming love. And it's real life people making real life choices to be a part of God's unfolding plan, whatever that is. And I just look at a real life woman named Naomi and a real life woman named Ruth and a real life man named Boaz, who had a real life son who eventually became the grandfather of King David, who became the forerunner of a savior, you know. And all of God's unfolding plan involved people who said, I will take on the hard with God's help, and I'll be part of his plan, whatever that looks like. And for most of us, we forget that people just like us are the people whose stories are written in the Bible, not because they were great, grand, or perfect, but because they were available and they were faithful. That's it. And so I need to always be available and I need to always be faithful. And I will see examples of God's redeeming love in my life. Hopefully, prayerfully, I will be an example of God's redeeming love in my life. And I will see God's unfolding plan as well in my life. And that's powerful stuff. All right. That's what I got. that's what I got, but it has absolutely been a blessing. Love you guys so much. I've enjoyed it so much, as I've said, and I hope that you will all be back and we'll all be a part of our next Bible study. You'll get information. I'll share exactly what that will be and how long it will be. But above all things, I hope you guys will be with us. Your presence here makes it powerful and makes it meaningful and special. So thanks for being here. I hope it's been a blessing to you. God bless you guys. Y'all have a good night.
God bless you too, brother.
Thank you,
Thank
brother.
you.
Appreciate y'all. Okay.
That was awesome.
Excellent.
Awesome.
See you, Pastor.
See you guys. God bless y'all.